We begin this hour with Democrats pushing back against President Trump's attempts to relitigate the 2020 election and preparing to counter what he has in store for future elections. What we know so far is that more than 24 House Democrats met this week for a closed-door strategy session to map out how they would respond if Trump tried to interfere in this year's midterms. House Democrats have told MS Now that one fear they have is that Trump could be using his voter restriction bill, the Save America Act, as a pretext. And if the legislation fails, which it looks like it will, Trump could declare a state of emergency to make electoral rule changes. Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer and 9 other Democratic senators also met with election experts last week to discuss how to respond to extreme scenarios, including the possibility of federal officers at polling sites, efforts to seize ballots in swing states, and the risk of foreign meddling. If any of those scenarios play out, Democratic lawmakers say they are ready to go to the courts and coordinate with local election administrators, secretaries of state, and states' attorneys general. On our show just yesterday, Michigan Attorney General Dana Nessel said she's already on the alert.
Of course, he's already trying to sow the seeds of doubt in our elections and to undermine people's faith in the safety and the security of our elections. We're prepared to go into court as quickly as possible in order to defend the rights of our voters and our poll workers and our clerks and our secretaries of state who are under threat by this administration.
Joining us now, Congressman Joe Morelle of New York, who organized the meeting with House Democrats on how to respond to potential meddling by Trump in the midterm elections, and Skye Perryman, President and CEO of Democracy Forward, which has been key in pushing back against Trump's election fraud claims and basically everything else the administration is doing. They stay in court. Congressman, I want to start with you, though. How will Democrats specifically be able to stop President Trump from trying to undermine the elections?
Well, good morning. Thanks for having me. Obviously, really important question, Eugene. One thing that we know is American elections are secure. Local election administrators, state officials do an amazing job in the 50-state system that we have. What's also clear is that the president, as he did in January 6th of 2021, will stop at nothing to continue to be in power. And I believe, and I think many believe, that he will not stop at trying to overturn results of the midterm elections, which he knows are not going to be favorable to him. I mean, he can read poll data just as well as the rest of us. So we have been working not just for the last several days or weeks, but literally for the last several months to make sure that we have a robust response that includes many things, but educating voters as to what their rights are and what they need to know, working with local and state election administrators, working with secretaries of state, with the attorneys general, as well as many, many outside groups, including Democracy Forward. So, Skye, thank you for the incredible work that your organization is doing. We're prepared. We're going to meet this moment. The president may try to overturn elections, but he will not succeed because we being the American people, are not going to let him.
But when you look at the actual the President Trump has thrown out the rule book on how to engage in an election. What are you actually going to be able to do? Or is the truth of the matter is lawsuits are kind of it?
Well, no, there's a lot of things that we are doing. First of all, we're just making sure the election officials at the local level, first of all, know what their rights are, know what the federal law is. They can't all be expected to be experts in this. So we're working on an ongoing basis every day with our partners and allies in democracy to make sure that they, first of all, know that. Second, we're educating voters. We're having community groups and community meetings. Many people have signed up to volunteer. And then, of course, there is the court system where we will not only respond, but we will proactively do everything we can to mitigate any risks to our elections. And so that's what we're doing. That's what you mentioned our tabletop exercise. We had over 60 people gathered together this past week. We went through 2 scenarios, but there are probably 100, 150 that we're preparing for, things that the president has suggested that he will do, and other things that we don't even know that the president has thought of, but we're trying to be creative because, to your point, there are no limits with this president. He is corrupt by nature. He has tried to corrupt our democracy once before. It'd be silly to think that he's not going to try to do the same thing. But we are prepared. and we will have, Leader Jeffries has directed me to assemble the greatest election protection effort in American history, and we are doing it every single day.
You know, Sky, to the congressman's point, since the first Trump term, if I learned anything, it was to keep an open mind and have an expansive imagination as possible in order to be prepared for what this president will or won't do. The congressman mentioned 2 scenarios. I don't know what those scenarios were in the tabletop exercises, but there was one thing that Congressman Jim Himes said to our colleague Lawrence O'Donnell that was expressly terrifying to me, and that was, he said, what if the president on election night seizes ballots? And then what happens to the chain of custody? Yeah. What, if anything, can be done, one, to prevent the president from seizing ballots, and 2, if he does seize ballots, is there any legal recourse, or are we, as the congressman said, in the middle of democracy dying?
So the president can't seize ballots, okay? The president can try to order people within the federal government to go seize ballots, and those people work at federal agencies. And federal agencies are bound by the law, and the federal agencies have been losing, including on all of these elections things because of what they're doing.
Fulton County.
So just to be
yeah, because I mean,
right.
By the time you file a lawsuit, the ballots have already been taken.
Well, so just to be clear, there's a range of scenarios here. Okay, one is president comes out and does the speeches like he likes to do. Well, then you go straight in to court and say this scheme that is happening is unlawful. They're not going to be able, I mean, to do what they want to do across the country, which they're not going to be able to do, but they would have to be able to work in a broader way. So that is the first thing. The second is the training of local election officials. Finally, though, let's just go through it. I mean, if they try to take ballots, there's going to be litigation and process after those ballots are taken. The ballots don't go away. The election doesn't, I mean, do you have to call another election? What are the remedies that you have once you go to court? The president, this is going to be very, very messy for the president. It's deeply unpopular with the American people. It blatantly looks like they're trying to cheat. I don't know if he's going to have the guts to do it, but if he does, we will be prepared. But there isn't some switch he can flip and sort of nullify the U.S. elections. And we need voters to understand that, because the main thing we need people to do is to make a plan and to vote and to let the lawyers fight it out in court with whatever else the administration tries to do.
Because to even seize ballots, say he tries to direct the FBI to go in and seize ballots at that critical juncture in the chain of command, which is before ballots have been tabulated or certified, but after they've been cast, you have to get a judicial warrant.
Correct. So that's just the point of the training of the training of both election officials, the training of and the education, the public education. The president has not been doing well in court at all. But I do just want to be very clear, even in some worst case scenario where the president's people come in and try to take ballots. This is not that's not the end of the election. This is going to be very messy.
How can you trust those ballots? So if somehow they were to get a judicial warrant and then they take the ballots before they've ever been certified, are those ballots then?
Are they tainted?
There are a number. This is what I'm going to say. There are a number of ways that countries, often the training of the United States, have been doing this and monitoring elections for some time. This is, just to be very clear, this is what pro-democracy movements do across the world. We are going to be able to have free and fair elections in this country. It is going to be harder because we have a president, unprecedentedly, for the first time in U.S. history, we have a president that does not want free and fair elections. But we are going to be able to have free and fair elections. And the main thing we need to do is to stop the doom scrolling and the sort of giving the president more airtime to scare the American people in to not voting. We need everyone to vote. We have to make sure the lawyers, members of Congress, the American people, there will maybe have to be mass mobilizations, are going to have to make sure that those votes are counted and the elections are realized. But the first thing that every person needs to do is to make a plan about how they're going to vote, how they're going to help their community vote. And that has, that is the central thing. And that's what the president doesn't want people doing. He wants people, going through, I don't even need to vote because they're going to take the ballots. Anyway, that is part of what this movement is doing. And that is where we have to just draw a hard line now.
Congressman Morelli, this is all very depressing. And I'm going to depress us some more because it's not just President Trump's speech on Thursday. For months and months, this administration has not just been trying to make it harder for people to vote around the country, but also actually acting on making it to remake the elections happening in this country. So I'm going to go to a list here that our producer Serena put together. He gutted and fired all the Democrats and at least one Republican from the Election Assistance Commission, which goes out and helps the states and locales kind of understand what are the best ways to operate an election. Trump is pushing anything that he mentioned on Thursday. The Justice Department has demanded states voter rolls. Courts have unanimously rejected this. DHS has threatened federal election security money for states if they don't use the federal system to verify voter citizenship. And the DHS secretary just this week on Friday threatened state election officials with prison time. So when you look at all of that and you're thinking through as someone who's doing the tabletop, who's leading this on behalf of House Democrats, what is your biggest fear, and how have you guys worked to make sure that biggest fear isn't realized?
Well, my biggest fear is that people start to believe that the president has power that he doesn't have. And when he makes recommendations or suggests he's going to do things, and these are unserious people. Not only unserious, they're incompetent. They don't even know how the election system works. The president suggesting people could hack into machines doesn't understand that voting machines in America aren't networked. They cannot be hacked into. There's a paper ballot that is produced. It's auditable. I mean, the things that he says are so foolish and ridiculous. So, but the thing that this guy mentioned is the intimidation factor. If people are afraid because they think their vote won't count, they may not come to the ballot. They're afraid that people might show up in violation of federal law and be armed at polling places. They may not show up. If they're afraid that the president might somehow illegally seize voting machines on election night, which would be, again, a violation of federal law. If they believe those things, they may not participate, which is why we want voters, make sure you check your registration status. Make sure you understand what the system is in your state, and make sure you vote as early as is humanly possible for you and for your family. Make a plan. Mm-hmm. When that happens, there is nothing that Donald Trump and his sycophants in the administration can do to stop the American people from exercising their vote, having their vote counted, and having their results validated by election officials and by the United States Congress. We will do all that. People should have faith in this. We're going to make sure that American elections and the midterm elections come off. I guarantee you that, and the American people are going to guarantee that.
And I know many election officials are trying to reassure voters in their states as well that they can have a safe and secure and will have a safe and secure election. Skye Perryman and Congressman Joe Morelle, thank you for your time.